Start to study the ways in which people think. And we all think differently. Information comes in, and we start to put that information into buckets. And there's really two different ways that we attack a problem through the thought process. I explain this in chapter 1 of my book, which I can send you all as a PDF if you want to begin this process. And I talk about the two different approaches to any problem or situation. And we all do these in one of two ways. One of the interesting things I heard when Raj was talking last night about the connection between the clients was that communication. Being able to hear and listen and see and feel what's coming across the table from the client across from you. Folks, there's two different ways that your clients approach problems. One is from a vision perspective. Where will we be? What will this look like? What problems will we have to avoid? And the other way that people look at the problems is through the action perspective. What will we do, and what will the contingencies be of what we do? Now, folks, we all do both. We have to. We have to be noun-oriented. We have to be verb-oriented. Every client I've ever sat across the table from will pick one over the other as their starting point. I'll give you a quick example and see if this fits for anybody. Quick show of hands. How many of you in the room, if you received an email from someone and there was an action involved in that email, your modus operandi would be to keep the email in your inbox as a reminder that there's something to do? Who are you right there? Okay? So those kinds of activities to me demonstrate vision or noun perspective. The name of the person can remind you of something to do. The subject line of the email will remind you of something to do. Now there's another group of you. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands as soon as I give you the prompt. How many of you, if you got an email that you needed to act on, your primary question would be, who can I send this to, or when can I park this on my calendar, or what to-do list can I add this to remind me that there's something to do? You look at the world through a verb perspective, an action perspective. We need both. Anybody in here old enough to remember leaving a voicemail for themselves? Who remembers leaving a voicemail for themselves? I mean, that was great, right? You're at home, you're about to finish with dinner, you remember something for tomorrow, you call your own message machine, you dial the number, you leave yourself a message. You go to sleep, you wake up, you commute to the office, you walk in, you see the blinking light, and what's your first thought? Somebody called. And it was you. The psychology impact of how we lead, if we understand that we think differently than that person across from us, it immediately lets us walk into this next study of sociology. How does that person across from the table receive the communication that I'm sharing with her or him? And there's three ways that they receive information. We all do all three. Of course, we have a preference, much like thinking. We all receive information in three different ways, simultaneously. There's a whole group of you in here who you can hear something one time, it goes in, and that statistic, that number, that example, it's in and it can come out at any time. All right, who lives with or loves with someone who can remember something from a long time ago? All right, well, you said... Right. Who's got kids that reminded you a decade later that a decade before you said you were going to go somewhere or do something and you didn't do that? Anyone ever had a kid pull that? It's like, you said we were going to go to Disney World, now you're there and I'm not. Second way that we consume information is we see it. We see it. We watch that video. We see that chart. We read that manual. There's a whole group of you that if you were to buy a new thing, a DVD player, a Blu-ray player, a telephone, a mobile phone, if you were to buy something new, how many of you, the first thing you would want to do is flip through the instruction manual just to see what the pictures look like? Is there anybody? A couple of you. And the third way that we consume information, of course, is by doing it. The kinesthetics of the audience. We build it, we create it, we draw it, we do it. Now my question to you as a group is, what happens when someone who prefers to share information auditorily is speaking with someone who prefers to consume information visually. Well, I can tell you what I've heard in the offices I get to spend time in. A leader comes in, tells the group what they should be doing, leaves. A week later, wonders why it wasn't done. I get to talk with the people that she or he works with, and I understand that there are certain groups, certain sub-leaders, certain leaders within the leadership who they need to see what was said. And here's how it sounds, folks. Someone's explaining something. You'll hear from someone else, they'll say, I don't see what you're talking about. I can't picture it. And then the person who's a strong auditory will say, how many times do I have to tell you? Does this remind anybody of anything? Growing up, education, schooling. I just listen to the vocabulary of the person sitting across from the table. When they say things like, it looks good to me, Jason, I can picture that. Where is this going? I go, wow, they're a visual information processor. Now, what do we do with that information that is processed? We track it, we review it, and we organize it. So what I want to share with you today are 4 different stories of effective team management and leadership. 4 thoughts that will get you going based on this foundation. How we think, how we communicate, and how we track the communication with and amongst one another's. If you push me against the wall and you say, hey, Jason, I need to be better, stat. I need to go back to the office. I need to be better today. I'm going to share with you there's 4 things. And by the way, I did everything I could to tie these 4 to all of the commentary that I was able to sit in on since Tuesday night. So of course we'll start with the visualization. We talked about that at dinner, after dinner on Tuesday night. I'm going to share with you what to build and how to build it so that starting tomorrow morning you will be a better leader. The third thing I want to do is I want to share with you the number 1 technique I know of to end the days ahead. Let me just do a quick calisthenics here. By show of hands, how many of you have had a very, very busy day? At the end of the day, you weren't exactly sure of what got done. Has anyone ever had one of those? Busy all through the day. You look back and go, what did I do? This one tactic will share this process of reflection with you. And then the 4th thing is what you can focus on, how you do that, and how you improve as a leader. And I'm going to do this with 4 short stories. The first story is of a guy that I work with named Kevin. Kevin's the chief learning officer of a Fortune 50 company based in the Midwest. Every year for the past 6 years, Kevin and I, we get 2 days together. We hike the Grand Canyon. You're all invited. We leave a week from Friday. But we start in one rim of the Grand Canyon. We hike to the river, and we come back out the next side. We do that in a day. It takes about 10 hours. And one hike a few years ago, I turned to Kevin. I said, hey, Kevin, I said, what's the most productive way you know of as a leader to start your day? I said, there's a lot of people who'd like to know this. I said, his training budget for the company that he runs is $1 billion. 260,000 employees around the world that he needs to make sure are the best that they can be. And I said, Kevin, what do you do to start the day? And we worked this one out. We went on an experiment. And to this day, he and I are both challenging ourselves to do this, but it's 300 seconds where we literally stop at the start of the day. Before we check email, before we print the calendar, before his assistant, before I get whatever, we do this process, this 5-minute visualization. Literally thinking about the direction of the day. Now, I'll give you an activity that you can practice with tomorrow morning. Tomorrow is Thursday. You can stop and close your eyes and you ask yourself, what are the arrows lining up toward between now and the time I'm done? Now, whether you write this, whether you say this, whether you think this, whether you process this, however you do that, the only question I have is, if you did this for 5 days in a row, you can now assess whether or not it's worth it. I'll share with you, Kevin and I have been doing this since we came up with it 3 years ago. I'll see him in a couple of weeks, and we're probably going to talk about it again. So when you visualize, Of course, we heard about visualization on Tuesday night after dinner, about visualizing a product or visualizing a service, visualizing something that goes out. What this one is it brings it back inside. If I am going to be the best leader I can be, how do I see that playing itself out? And I will share with you one little caveat. 5 minutes by yourself is a long time.